Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and forgive me if I'm a little bit tired, I just interviewed Ron Paul early in the morning again and had to edit and post all day. It's been kind of exhausting, but we thought we'd do a few videos as well. We got to get those reports done, lots in the news, and one of those stories in the news is that Venezuela, it's official, they're in default, and there's so much to go into here, but there's this article that John has up by the Telegraph, why there's no future for bondholders as Venezuela staggers into default. Why is there no future for bondholders, John?
I don't know. Let me read in my book here from 2015. Oh, that's right. Of course, what happened in Venezuela is they're falling into a default because of mass hyperinflation that was caused by low oil prices. Now, the low oil price, the reason why was because they were dependent on that oil as revenue. 95% of the revenue of the government came from oil royalties. And now, of course, that the oil price is down, you're seeing just massive money printing through Venezuelan bolivars to save the government from going bankrupt. Well, they're bankrupt, and I predicted that back in mid 2015 when I read. Actually, it was a little bit earlier. I believe it was. I started to write this about early in 2015. So about 3 years ago, I wrote about this, and it's of course come true. A lot of the things that I said that they would. As you read my book, you'll probably see them enter, like being a hyperinflation.
That book, by the way, is The End of Freedom, How Our Monetary System Enslaves Us, up on Amazon, but go on, John.
Yeah, no. It's so interesting to take a look at, the default and what the fallout could be here, because I have, in my book, if you get it, you would see a list over the bond issues that Venezuela has, and this is where the fallout is coming and who's going to get hit.
Page 194. Yeah. Open your books, guys. It's repeat after me.
Yeah, exactly. No, this is interesting. So, for example, I'm looking at the sovereign debt because it's government that's the worst case here. And in sovereign issues, they issued over 24 issues of 37.2 billion in US dollars. So that's the big problem here, is that 37 billion in US dollars, because US dollars versus the Bolivar. Well, when we did a video back for I don't remember, it was a year or a little over a year ago.
We've been doing these for a while.
Yeah, we talked about how the exchange rate, that the official one was 1 to 10. Well, when you are having to pay somebody back in a different currency and the exchange rate changes, that's a huge risk. It's called carry trade. You can go and borrow in some other currency, for example the yen that the carry trade happens in, then they go and invest in other investments. Now they have been borrowing in US dollars. That's a massive issue because the exchange rate, the official, is 1 to 10. Well, I just did a recent calculation because I use Bitcoin, because that tells me what the free market value of the Venezuelan Bolivar is. And currently it's 57,572. So the Venezuelan bolivars are worthless. Nobody wants to get paid back in US dollars in continuously rapidly declining value of Venezuelan bolivars. So what's going to happen? There's a clear default that would happen in several places here. Now, of course, Citibank is one of the biggest banks that are American in Venezuela. And back, Obama issued that executive order. We talked about that several times, which was a threat, because it was a threat to the United States because of the banking system. The Citibank has borrowed, all this money to the government and to corporations in Venezuela. So it's a huge issue, and they also owe 40.66 something billion in corporate bonds. So all their corporations and so on are owing that, and in a whole wide array of other currencies. There's tons of them when you look at Australian dollar, Chinese yuan, Swiss franc, and so on. So that is a huge issue now, because they have worthless fiat paper money. And we've talked about this so many times throughout history, 600-700 times, that the system fails and nobody learns, and now we see it again, and then people continues to say this. Oh, that Venezuela, that's not us.
It's over almost 1,000 years, 1024 AD in China, and fiat currency, of course. For those that are just joining us here at WAM, it's just fiat currency, just IOU notes, debt. It's printed out of thin air by the central banks, quantitative easing, fractional reserve, just centralization of this currency that's based on nothing, as it is with US dollars. Only 3% is actually printed on paper. The other 97% is digital. But the point is they just create and create and create, which devalues. And that creates vast amounts of debt and inflation in the market and for the consumer. And it becomes very volatile after a while. You'd think, well, it's centralized. It's not supposed to be volatile. It's volatile when it comes to its inevitable end. And all fiat currencies eventually revert to their intrinsic value of zero. They always have and they always will. And right now, for example, in the US, they're trying to raise those interest rates to drop them down when the dollar crashes like they did in 2008. And I believe they dropped it 5.5% after 2008. Well, if they do that now, I mean, it's going to be a much bigger calamity. They're going to go into negative interest rate territory. So it's very, very, very dangerous. And just going into that a bit further with Venezuela, Venezuela has a hyperinflation that we've seen so many times before in history. We saw it in Zimbabwe. We saw it in the Weimar Republic, in Germany in 1923. Yeah. And it just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. And the problem is this totalitarian socialist government in Venezuela. We see Maduro eating an empanada on television while he forces his citizens to eat rabbits that they then end up taking in as pets. People are in bread lines. They got numbers. They can only get a certain amount of everything. There's no toilet paper. There's a problem getting passports to leave the country. The amount of problems in Venezuela just continue to pile higher and higher while people go into the store with piles of money that they're pouring water in because they got to weigh it. Every menu at every restaurant changes constantly every single day practically, and it's just become incredibly terrible. People are drinking out of gutters or breaking into zoos to steal animals to eat them, and this is the inevitable end of a centralized banking authority and a centralized state that coerces people into oblivion, stealing from them, regulating them to death with all these rules and regulations, while not actually giving a damn about what individuals want, what the market wants, what the demand wants. While the leaders live in palaces, the people live in gutters, and it's gone to its inevitable end. And this is the same thing was happening with Chavez before, just not on the same rampant scale. They just blame whatever leader's in charge at the time. This has been going on for a long time. I've spoken with so many incredible Venezuelans, many who have fled Venezuela and are very happy to be out, but are scared for their families, talking about, this was going on under Chavez. This is the inevitable end of every socialist empire. And it is an empire. It's just a failing one. And either it's going to fall into communism or it's going to go to free markets if people wake up. But first, people have to wake up. And hopefully, when Maduro is going around just killing opponents, purging people, giving guns to, his supporters to purge all people who don't agree with him. Exactly, gun-free zones. Exactly.
And Venezuela is one of the murder capital. Like Caracas is the murder capital of the world. Together with top 10, it was 3 other cities currently.
So what is coming next, John? I mean, where is this going to actually head? I mean, it just seems like it can't get any more crazy.
Yeah, well, we talk about hyperinflation and government, creating hyperinflation in order to pay down their debt. Well, they actually have some debt themselves that they issued in Venezuelan Bolivars. That's going to be easy to pay back. But the problem is all that maybe minuscule compared to what it could have been in other currencies that is destroying them, because this government could have gone. The thing is, the Keynesians believe that you can continue to pay back and print more money all the time. Well, it ends up in this, like in a hyperinflation, and then the people said, I had enough. No.
It's kind of like Paul Krugman saying that he likes riots because broken windows somehow stimulate the economy.
Broken windows stimulates the stupid Keynesian economy. Paul Krugman, I'm really sick of this guy. Sorry, I could go on around for hours.
Propagandist. Proven wrong thousands of times.
But, going back to what's currently happening as they defaulted now, Russia, Kremlin just announced that it agreed to restructure $3.15 billion of debt payment that Venezuela owes Moscow. Russia's finance ministry is spreading the payments out over 10 years with minimal payments in the first 6. why is Russia going in and borrowing money, first of all? Well, they would like to get a piece of the resources. And, you got to understand that Venezuela has one of the biggest oil reserves in the world.
Yeah.
So, of course, everybody would love to have a little piece of borrowed money there so they could go and loot, and get the contracts as the fallen socialist empire is, in its final days and completely crushed. They want to go and loot it. That's what always these countries, doesn't matter. And you can talk all about, Russia is so great, Putin is trying to do great things. No, these guys are predators no matter what. They go in and borrow money because they know that the certain outcome of this is a default. They would just, okay, I'm going to lose $3.5 billion, but I can get that back in resources after they defaulted on their debt.
Well, it's all about debt, right? Everything's about debt. These bankers, these governments thrive off of debt. They love debt because it pushes the public into subservience. And as I go into so many times, almost every video, it's a fact that they shove you down that bottomless pit of debt, and you're forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, which puts you in perfect servitude to them, exactly where they want you.
Yeah. One more thing from Venezuela, which has kind of been a development for a while. I use, of course, to find out the true fair market value of the Venezuelan Bolivar, I use Bitcoin as an intermediary. Now, to look at what's happening with Bitcoin in Venezuela, there's a lot of people mining Bitcoins currently in Venezuela. Because Bitcoins, first of all, they're not part of this hyperinflationary system. They're set at a certain value, so they become super valuable. I remember when I looked at it, I don't remember exactly what it was, the number, when I first started looking at this, but I think it was at 10 million. Well, now you're looking at 326 million Venezuelan Bolivars for one Bitcoin. So you can see the crazy amount of rise in the store of value that Bitcoin had. It's not that the price has gone up so much. It's the actual store of value that Bitcoin had when people fled from the fiat, which is losing rapid value. They jumped onto Bitcoin, which actually has a set 21 million. That's all that's going to be, and people are flooding over, and they're starting to use Bitcoin to pay between each other, because they're flying the flawed fiat system that always fails, and people are getting sick, and we're in the final stages. It's not very long now until the Venezuelan Bolivars is game over. As I said, it take a year, and sure enough, the hyperinflation kind of started a year ago when it really started to gain traction, and then just within a very short period of time, now we're seeing probably 7-8 months into it, but now you're just seeing every day like it went, tremendously loss of value in the Venezuelan Bolivar.
It's a domino effect, and it's interesting you mentioned that, John, about Bitcoin, is that well, first of all, it's decentralized. Only 21 million coins will ever be created. In the year 2140 is when it stopped. They can't just print more, which is what the fiat system's all about. And it's all based in debt, while Bitcoin is based in, scarcity demand application, the demand of the individual. But with that said, I can't stress enough, for those that just don't like Bitcoin, fair enough, fine, that's up to you.
And also, gold has been hugely performing as well.
No, but I mean, for those that just don't like Bitcoin, that's fine. But it's important to mention how incredibly important Bitcoin is for so many Venezuelans that I've spoken with. I was in a car ride with Dan Dix of Press for Truth, actually, in British Columbia, Canada. And it was a ride share, and one of the guys that came in happened to be Venezuelan. He was on his phone, he was texting, and the driver asked us about Bitcoin. We had talked with him on a few other rides before. And the second we said Bitcoin, the guy's ears perked up. He says, Bitcoin? I love Bitcoin. Have you heard of Steemit? And he just starts going into all these cryptocurrencies and how much he loves them. And he then said, I'm from Venezuela. I escaped Venezuela. I saw the hyperinflation coming. I saw all these problems happening. I saw the problems of socialism. I saw the problems of centralization. And Bitcoin is a savior. It's been able to, there's so many opportunities it provides people in Venezuela, who, by the way, a lot of people are getting punished for having Bitcoin in Venezuela. But that's a whole other story. But I mean, people that are, you know, as much off the radar as possible with it. I mean, it's become a savior. People accepting Bitcoin, people buying with Bitcoin. They're actually able to get you know, goods for services and et cetera, et cetera. And it's been a huge wake up call to so many people, which is another example of people shifting over to that decentralized system once they've experienced the worst of the centralized one.
Yeah, well, the centralized government can never control the the free market in an economy.
Yeah.
It can never do so. And they tried, you know, in Zimbabwe and other places to ban gold and so on. It never worked because people will always work and transact with each other. They don't care about the government, even though that the government threatens to kill you. People want to survive, and they're willing to use these things that actually keep the value of their hard-earned money instead of keeping it in complete worthless fiat like Argentinians did back in the 2000s, and they lost, you know, 70-80% of the value that they had overnight. It's the same with Cyprus in 2013. People went into Bitcoin there, and they managed to get out of the bail-ins that happened there as well. So you can see that how Bitcoin works, comparison with gold and silver. It works as a way of transitioning out of the banking system, but for easy transaction, because gold and silver is not very easy to transact per se. You can't send. I can't send, you know, my dad in Norway gold and silver overnight. It's impossible. So Bitcoin can transfer that value, but you can go and then go to Gold Shop, for example, then you know, go and buy gold and silver with Bitcoin. So it's super fast transaction, even though it has a lot of issues with the transaction lately. It's so 100 times better, and it's decentralized, not controlled by anyone, so they can't steal your money.
Well, it's funny because as a very wise and rich man once mentioned, I can't remember the man's name, I saw it was during a hearing, I believe, on, it might have been a congressional hearing, I forget what it was, but he said, if China bans anything, you should probably invest in it. Look at Facebook, look at Google, look at YouTube, all that. It's probably a good business plan to invest in whatever China bans. And of course, with the ICO ban in China and their attempt to just completely muzzle Bitcoin, and then now they're going back on it, giving it a second thought. It's incredible because people think, well, that's going to be the end of it. Well, no, because individual demand speaks very loudly. Oh, yeah. You can ban marijuana all you want, but the more after they banned it, it became taboo. More people wanted it, and eventually you saw this massive revolution where tons of people smoked marijuana, and it was like almost everyone you knew had smoked it at least once in their life, if not many times over. And it's just another example that you can't make an idea illegal. You can't make something that the public has a demand for illegal, because people will still flood to that, and
actually, you know, more than before
in many cases. Yes, absolutely. So with that said, closing it off, we really send our prayers for the people of Venezuela. We hope that people break free from the chains that so many have revered for so long, and see that this whole movement towards socialism and, you know, power to the people is not about the people at all. It's about creating a giant collective of people, coercing them, and then the people at the very top, the politicians and the bankers, make off with all your cash and live in palaces while you are drinking out of gutters, and that's the end game for them all. So I really hope that people continue to break free from this, educate themselves, take action, and then see that change and be the change they wish to see in this world. So thanks for going into this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Thanks for watching, everyone. Check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so vastly demonetized by the Anti-Defamation League on YouTube, as they flag all of our content as hate speech. You can also find our Bitcoin address in the description in the comments, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. You can also find me at Josh Sigurdson at Steemit.com. That's Steemit.com, the future of social media, as the dinosaur social media digs its own grave. You get paid in cryptocurrency, Steem that is, on Steemit.com via the upvote of your posts, so I hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.